So, number 11, an update on where we're at in the war. The last image represents 1917, 1918, where the battles get so intense. They reach a new level of intensity because people have finally figured out how to use these weapon systems. So, the battles that you see in 1917 are horrific, absolutely horrific, because this technology is continuing to grow and be used to kill yet more people. In 1918, things kind of come to a head. Germany tries a last-ditch effort to save the war and to beat the French and the British and the Russians, and they get very, very close. It's something called the Kaiserschlacht, the Emperor's Battle, the King's Battle. They basically take the best of the best of what is left of their army, and remember, most of their army at this point is older men and young boys who are too young to fight. Germany doesn't have the colonial resources and the colonial bodies that the British and the French do. So for every person that dies on the British side, you can replace them with a Canadian, an Australian, a New Zealander, and they're still going to be pretty fresh. For everybody that dies on the French side, there are a lot more people in Africa that they can call up to fight and replace their ranks with fresh troops. When a German man dies in the war, he's gone, and Germany has nothing to replace him with at this point, except for old men and underfed boys. So they try this last-ditch effort. It doesn't work, and the cracks in German society from throwing all of their resources into this war, they get larger, and the society begins to break down. The army essentially falls apart. The navy revolts, the government falls, there are bread riots at home, and all of this is happening in France, by the way, and in Russia. We haven't even gotten into Russia. Russia falls apart in 1917, they have a revolution, and that story dovetails off into its own horrific history. But yeah, Germany, they run out of resources, and they run out of time. The Americans are involved in this war at this point. And pretty soon their numbers are going to overwhelm the Germans. Not by the Americans being stronger or better. Really, the French and British were just taking American troops and putting them into the line to kind of protect certain areas, and then taking their more experienced troops and using them to coordinate attacks. And so, the Americans can't do all the fancy fire and move tactics that everybody else has learned in the past few years. But essentially, what you need to know is Germany falls, and the new government is forced to surrender. They are stomped upon by an extremely unfair treaty. Let's not forget that the Germans never were fighting on German soil here. They are still in France at the end of the war, and yet they have to sign an armistice. And they are forced to sign this armistice that basically rips apart their country. They won't be able to have an army for decades. They will lose billions of marks in reparations. They take all of the blame for all of the war and have to pay for all of it. And really, we can talk about this another time, but they really weren't the ones at fault totally for this war. But because of the Treaty of Versailles and because of the unfairness of it, this allows, and because of the economic collapse that comes in Germany as a result of having to pay these reparations, this is what allows Hitler and the Nazi Party to rise in the 1920s and 30s, and allows them to take over a country and ramp up the scale of destruction. And so what I wanted to show in this last image was just the fact that this war is not over, that this same power struggle is going to repeat itself. There were generals at the time who would look at the Versailles Treaty and say, this isn't peace. This is a 20-year armistice. And they were almost dead on target. The next war is going to be even worse. The mechanization is going to reach new heights. And the killing power of man and machine is only going to be intensified. And it is a direct result of the First World War that the second one is fought.